welcome to Family Matters for October 2023. And tonight we are talking about depression and spirituality with Kathy Strachan. Kathy has had a wealth of experience in nursing, palliative care and pastoral care. So she's going to bring a professional aspect to this topic of depression. As a Bible student, Kathy is also able to help us understand the links between depression and spirituality.
So tonight we're going to learn about how to recognise depression in ourselves or in someone else and how it affects our spiritual lives. And Kathy will give us tools on how to deal with depression and keep our spirituality safe through the dark times. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Kathy.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Tonight I was going to do a Bible reading from Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 3. And it goes like this. The Sovereign Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, for the display of his splendour. So thanks again for joining us tonight, Kathy.
Pleasure.
So we're talking about depression and spirituality. Can we just start with a definition? What is spirituality? What do you mean by spirituality?
Spirituality is a term which they use in the medical field to denote all the things about the self which are beyond the physical. So it's your the things that give you in your personal life meaning and purpose, your connection to other people, your connection to nature, your connection to the arts or creativity. And a big part of acknowledging that there is a higher power or a greater being or something bigger than yourself. So I use that term to describe it because that's a very sort of medical term, and in our circles it really means religion. But I don't like using the term religion because that's a very much a man-made thing. So what I really want to talk about as far as our spirituality is concerned is our relationship between our personal selves and our Father, and how, if we have depression, how that might affect that relationship. So it's from our perspective, I want to rather talk about how it impacts our spiritual life and our spiritual connection with God.
That sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay.
Okay, and I just want to give one qualifier to everybody.
Okay, carry on.
Part of the reason why I feel quite strongly about the subject, it's not necessarily about the depression part, but about our relationship with God, is that any point in learning about these things, as you said in your prayer, is how can we learn to help others better? How can we be more like Jesus in helping other people? And I really feel like we are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus and the mouth of Jesus in today's world, because he doesn't have a physical body present today, and that our calling is to be able to act on his behalf and learn to be like him. So if we learn about depression, what it might look like in other people, what it might look like in ourselves, and how it interrupts or may interfere with our relationship with our Father in heaven, then that will help us to help other people or to help ourselves. So it's more of an awareness thing.
Right. Yeah.
That's cool.
Sounds good. Looking forward to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell us what is depression? What would you define depression?
Okay, so from a medical and psychological perspective, there's quite a lot of reasons why. Do you mind if I share my screen? It's blocked for me to
Oh,
share my
sure,
screen here.
sure, yeah.
Sorry.
I've done that earlier. Hang on.
If we could see Kathy's face, it would be lovely.
It's there. Presenter. There we go.
I can only see you and me and myself.
Okay, you should be presenting now.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Oh, can you see it now?
The screen? No,
No.
not yet.
Oh, okay. Oh, it shows that I can on mine.
Oh, okay. Hang on a minute. Are you on the other computer? Because you've
No,
got two
I'm
there,
just,
haven't you?
yeah, I just want to, it says my share screen is blocked, but let me just transfer it
Oh,
over.
hang on. It
Hang
might be
on.
up on the other computer. Just a moment. I will change that around. Sorry about this, everyone. May present it. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
No, still not yet.
Not yet. There's a little share screen button at the bottom where your mic and your camera are.
It's got a line through it.
Just click it.
Oh, no, it's like flat and with a line through it, so I can't.
Oh,
Okay, I'll just talk. It's all right.
okay. Sorry about that.
I'll have to send you the presentation so that you
Yeah.
can share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll
so
send
the
it
question
out.
was, okay, sorry about that. The question was, what is depression? So generally, for the understanding of depression is that you have a low mood from time to time, but everybody experiences times of being a difference between being happy and being unhappy. But depression is more than just a low mood for a short period of time. It can be, it can end up being quite a serious condition, which can affect your mental health. Some of it is physiological. In other words, it's a medical condition that you need to have medical treatment for. And some of it is psychological, where you have trauma or emotional disturbances in your life that can come from any number of things, like getting divorced, somebody dying, losing your job, having a lot of family problems, whether they are an ill child or looking after parents. It's not necessarily just an emotional response to a situation. It can also be a physical. Sometimes it's one or the other. Sometimes it's both together. And so it's always really important that we think about having a medical intervention so that it can be determined whether it's physiological or psychological or both, and what is the appropriate treatment, obviously.
So how would you go about doing that, Kathy? Who would you go and see? Would you have to see a psychiatrist or just your GP?
No. So you start with your GP, and the GP would do an assessment and do a referral to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, depending on the severity of your condition. If it is a temporary situation, as in you've got a really lot of work stress at the moment and it's affecting your mood and your ability to cope, they can probably prescribe you something. If they think that the situation is bigger than they can cope with, they would refer, and it's more trauma related, they would refer you to a psychologist. If the psychologist and the doctor, or either or, or determine that it is a real mental health issue, as in it's a psychiatric issue, then you would be referred to a psychiatrist, because psychiatrists can prescribe much stronger drugs and more mental health related drugs, like for schizophrenia and things like that. I don't think that falls into the realm of what we're talking about at the moment. And the chances of needing to see a psychiatrist would only be if you had major trauma in your life, like child abuse, something that that was impacted your life when you were a child and has now got so big that as an adult you can't cope with it. You would then see a psychiatrist, because it would be a combination of a lot of therapy and medication. I'm not talking about that kind of thing, because honestly, as lay people, we don't have the capacity to deal with that kind of trauma. You really need a professional person. And I don't want us to think that just because you've attended a talk like this and I've told you what these spiritual tools are that can help us, that suddenly makes us able to deal with that kind of situation. I've got a sister, there's a personal friend of mine that's a sister in the meeting, who was abused as a child. And she's been in long-term psychotherapy, and she still has periods where she just can't cope with the world. And I think when you don't understand the depth of the misery that these people live with, we think, oh, like, what's their problem? They can just, pull themselves together. It's seriously past that. It's really, really difficult to cope with something that's been very traumatic in somebody's life.
Okay. So if I have depression, then just coming back to the depression, back to people here, what does it feel like? Like I've experienced a couple of different forms of depression, but like, is there a rule of thumb? What does it feel like to people?
There's not a rule of thumb. What I wanted to do is put up on the screen, and I've got 4 sort of columns, or in a big table. These feelings, the thoughts that people have, the behavioral symptoms, and the physical symptoms. Okay, so if we look at feelings, it can be things like you feel sad, you feel miserable, you feel unhappy. Now those are kind of normal, and they fall within the normal emotional range. But when you're consistently sad and miserable, and when you're very irritable and you can't respond in a pleasant, kind manner on an ongoing basis, when you feel completely overwhelmed with the world, when you feel guilty without having a reason for it, or you can't overcome your guilt, when you feel frustrated about everything, when you lack confidence, when you are indecisive and you can't choose and make decisions, when you're unable to concentrate, when you're disappointed. There's so many feelings that go into it, and not everybody has all those feelings or all those symptoms. But when I go through all of these things, you can get an idea of the combination of these feelings and thoughts together is just what the doctor and the psychologist would assess. So some of the thought patterns would be, I'm such a failure. It's all my fault. Nothing good ever happens to me. And people go through moments of maybe feeling like, oh, I'm so useless. But in the next moment, the next day you might be feeling better. But this is an ongoing feeling of worthlessness and uselessness and nothing being good in life, and that things are never going to change. You can't see a way out. The biggest thing about this is a feeling of hopelessness. Like, what's the point? Where am I going? And when you are really strongly connected to God, and you feel that you understand the purpose of life and the meaning of life, and it's that the God's purpose is to fill the world with his glory and all that. Those are very easy things to just trip off your tongue, but to genuinely feel them and feel that you are part of God's plan, and that you have a purpose and a mission in this world, and that you want to become like Jesus, and your goal is the kingdom, and to be in that very spiritual and peaceful, happy state. When you're in depression, that just looks like totally unattainable. So, and people that have been depressed are best at recognizing it in other people. And I'm not saying that's a wonderful reason to be depressed, but honestly, when you can see that people are kind of getting to life's not worth living, people would be better off without me, and it's really, they're getting to a very low ebb, the worst outcome is suicide. Okay, I'm not saying that everybody's going to go in that direction, but that genuinely is the worst outcome, because you feel like even God doesn't love you. Nobody loves you. And even if they say they do they really mean it? And what difference is it going to make in your life? And you lose perspective of everything, and you lose hope in everything. And that's the hardest part. So considering that our faith is very much based on hope, I mean, what is faith but the substance of things hoped for? When you've lost hope and you have no hope, of course it's going to affect your spiritual life and your relationship with God.
And it's amazing too that the way that the brain knows all that. It
I
knows
know.
there's a hope. It
Yep.
knows everyone loves you, and there's support there. But
You
the
can't
the
believe
It's
it.
feeling it here.
the feeling
Yeah,
just isn't there. The feeling doesn't work. The feeling's not there anymore.
absolutely.
It's a
And
really
that's very hard for somebody that's never experienced that level of lowness to actually understand. It's like, well, tomorrow you'll feel better. Have a good cry, and it'll all be, you'll feel better for having had a good cry, or snap out of it and get yourself together. Those kind of sayings are so unhelpful. And I'll give you an example. I mean, I've been to this movie and been, very close to the edge. And I remember sitting in a public lecture one Sunday night, and the speaker said, if you don't want to live forever, there must be something wrong with you. And I was like, well, I didn't put my hand up, but I felt like it. That's me. The thought of living forever just filled me with absolute horror, because just living today was so worthless. Do you
hard
know what I
enough.
mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So if
yeah,
it's bad enough now, why would I want to do it forever?
yeah,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
then the
And
other
then,
thing yeah, sorry.
sorry, carry on. No,
No, I was going to say I've got behavioral and physical symptoms, because these are sometimes things so the combination of the thoughts and the feelings, but then behavioral symptoms, and these are some of the strongest indicators of, because your behavior changes from what it normally is. And one of the biggest things is withdrawal from society or from connection with others, which includes God and Jesus. So you withdraw from your close family and your friends. You stop wanting to go out. You stop doing the things that you used to really enjoy, whether it's sport or art or going to church or taking enjoyment, pleasure from your work. And you start, sleeping is a big factor. So a lot of people that are depressed will sleep a lot. Or just do mindless things like watch television, or do avoidance things like read a lot of books so that they don't have to face the real world. Rely on alcohol to, dampen the feelings, or drugs, very common thing, whether it's sedatives or anti-anxiety or sleep medication or anything like that. And then the physical symptoms, one of them, as I said, is that you sleep a lot. People feel sick and not well, and so you might have a lot of tummy upsets, or a lot of tummy aches, or a lot of headaches, or you just feel like you've got butterflies and a churning feeling in your stomach all the time because you're very highly anxious and highly strung, loss of appetite, or significant weight loss or weight gain. And not everybody's going to have all of these, but any combination of these four different things of thoughts and feelings and behavioral symptoms and physical symptoms. And if you have two or three in this group and two or three in that group and two or three in each of them, when you put it all together, you can go, ooh, this is not a good picture and it's not looking good. Some people might get all of them, but most people don't. And the other thing, which I don't know whether anybody has ever said this before, and I speak from personal experience, there is nothing like the acting skills of a depressed person, because they can con the world that everything's nice and bright and cheerful and everything's going well on the outside. And as soon as you close the door, get in the car, leave the office or whatever, the world falls apart and you are miserable and sad.
Yeah.
And I
Just
remember,
don't talk to
sorry,
them for more than 5 minutes so they can keep the show up. Yeah.
yep. So
Been there. Put on the
I
show.
remember I remember a very prominent television personality here in Australia, and this was probably about 10 years ago. And she was a really bright, sunny, cheerful, gorgeous girl of about 30. Really lovely, pretty girl, successful career on morning television and presenting. And she suicided one day, and everybody was like, "Oh, we never knew there was anything wrong. She was always so sunny and cheerful." And it's because they keep all the, they don't want to share where they are at and their feelings. And in Australia, we have a Are You Okay Day. So it's letter R, letter U, letter OK, with a question mark. And it encourages people to ask colleagues, friends, people that you wouldn't necessarily, it's not like, hi, how are you? It's, are you okay? Indicates that you're asking a question. Are you really doing okay inside? And it's a way of breaking the ice to initiate a conversation. Should there be okay? And most people will go, yeah, I'm cool. Or thank you for the opportunity to talk, and then would be willing to talk about it if they wanted to. But it's an opening. And that's the whole thing behind the exercise, is to try and get people, if they would like to talk, to have the opportunity to talk, because most people don't just want to go around and hang all their, emotions on their sleeves
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. I know that's really important. Is there a way you can, like, if you see all those symptoms, or some of those symptoms, and you sort of know, like, you go, I think that person is depressed, and you go along and you go, are you okay? And they go, oh yeah, I'm fine. What do you suggest then? Is it, do we just leave it, or do you probe a little
Okay.
deeper?
I ask this question all the time when people I say, hi, how are you doing? And they go, I'm fine. And I go, no, seriously, are you really okay? And I genuinely ask, I do that often. Particularly if you know that somebody's grieving, or that they've got a reason to be miserable or sad or upset. And I go, seriously, are you really okay? And then often it gives them the opportunity to talk, because automatically, if somebody says to you, hi, how are you doing? Your immediate response is, I'm fine, thank you, and you. And it's automatic. We don't think about it. It's like a ritual that we all do. But I do often. And some people go, yeah, no, I really am okay. And other people will go, not really. And then you go, do you want to talk about it? And you giving them the opportunity. So I don't ever push it, because if people don't want to talk to you about it, you're just putting them in an awkward position. But
Yeah.
if you do it in a really caring way and you go, look, seriously, how are you doing? Do you want to talk? A lot of people will say yes, because they don't get the opportunity often. And if they say no, then you have to respect that, because that's their choice and they're not ready, or they don't want to, or they've got somebody that they're talking to and they don't need to talk to you. But it also really, really comes down to a situation of trust, which is sad to say, but in the community, if people are going to talk to others about what you talk to them, then they're not that willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. Like at the Bible school recently, I've got a big mouth, and I asked a sister, "Hi, how are you doing?" And she goes, "Oh, okay." I go, "Really? That doesn't sound very okay." And she was, she said, "Oh." So I gave her a big hug, and that just set the tears off. And then then we could go away and talk about it, and we had a really good discussion. But unless you ask and you really mean it, then don't ask.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Just leave it as the hi, how are you, and like
Don't
move
know,
on.
thank you.
Yeah.
yeah. But the thing is too is that sometimes when people don't want to talk about it, I just give them a hug to say, look, I care, I'm praying for you or whatever. And I'm not expecting them to talk to me about it. Maybe they've got their own, but it's just nice to know that somebody cares and loves you and is willing to pray for you. And just a hug goes a long way. I know not everybody's a hugger. I'm a big hugger, but it can be anything. It can be a really warm handshake with two hands to go, I'm thinking of you. I'm praying for you. I hope things are going okay for you. And even if they're not, I don't need to know, but we're in this together type of thing. And that helps a lot sometimes for people, just to know that somebody's there if they need them.
Yeah. So where to from here then, Kathy?
Okay, so the next section that I had kind of thought about is, if I've got depression, what am I going to do to help myself?
Yes.
And some of this is very practical stuff. And I'm probably heard this term so many times, but self-care is so important. And I know, I'll be honest, in my background in Christadelphia, self-care for me sounded really selfish and self-indulgent. And I kind of felt guilty for doing something for myself. Now, having grown up and being more in the medical field and getting a slightly different perspective on it, when people say you can't, my cup runneth over, from a biblical quotation, is like, how can your cup run over if it isn't full? So and the overflow is what you should be sharing with other people. So you need to make sure that you are in a good place. If you're in a bad place, how do you get yourself into a good place? So if your cup is half full or empty, how do you refill it? And how do you re-engage yourself so that you have enough to give to other people? So I'm learning the hard way that self-care is very important. From
Yes.
the So, and this can be, it will be different for everybody. What looking after yourself physically and emotionally and spiritually looks like for me will be different for everybody else. But the general rules are that you stay healthy, that you get enough sleep, that you have enough private time and quality time with God and with your loved ones. So that it can be anything. It can be you do sport together, you do walking together, you do reading together, you do praying together, you do, you eat healthily, you are physically well, you look after your body and your mind and your spiritual life. And looking after your spiritual life for me is spending enough quality time with my God, which means reading what he has to say to me, genuinely be still and know that I am God, talking to him, looking for him in my daily life and everything that I do, and having him in the forefront of my mind. Now, when you're depressed and miserable, you and your misery are at the forefront of your mind, not God and Jesus.
Absolutely.
And you kind of wallow in your misery and even if you're not consciously thinking about it, you've got this apathy and this lethargy, and it's like, well, you should be praying about it. Well, I haven't even got the energy or the enthusiasm to talk to God about it. Never mind, talk to my spouse about it, or whatever So you actually have to make a conscious choice that if somebody says to you, is your relationship with God important? If your answer is yes, then how are you going to deal with that? Not you must pray, you must read, you must spend time with God, because when you are miserable and people give you must do, you're like, why should I? I'm not, I don't have the energy. I don't want to. I can't. But when you make the decision, it's like an alcoholic. If you make a decision to stop drinking and you make a decision to make a concerted effort to go to AA and to put all those things in place, it's exactly the same with your spiritual life and your spiritual health. Once you've made a decision, you've got to act on it. And the acting on it is the hard part, but you have to have made the decision first. So
I guess it's like saying pushing beyond the feeling or the lack of feeling, to go, this is what I know I need to do personally, even though I'm not feeling it. Would you say that's kind of what we're looking at in this scenario?
I do. But for me, the other thing is that if you are genuinely honest with God in your prayers, and I've also learned the hard way with this, is that if you just go to him and you go, you know what, I'm miserable, I'm crying and I'm useless and I'm worthless and I'm all these things. Please help me. Like the father that came to Jesus and said, help thou my. That's when you're feeling so low that you can't lift yourself out. And if you just go to God and say, help thou my unbelief, he's never going to say no, even if it
No.
takes a while for you to feel the answer. And
Yes.
In fact,
I think being honest with God and going, you know what, this is how I'm feeling now. I don't like feeling like this. I don't want to feel like this. Please, can you help me move past this? He's never going to say no, but he will provide the way for you, even if you can't see it at that moment when you're praying. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
in fact, the simple prayer, help me, is
Yep.
probably one of the most spiritual prayers we can ever pray, especially at a time like that.
Because you get to the point where you know that
Yep.
of my own self, I can do nothing. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? I
you
can
haven't got
only do
anything
it with
left.
God's help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Anyway, so self-care is a big thing. And then I've got a whole list of beautiful spiritual quotations, which I thought I'd share with you. Okay, what I wanted, I'll just read this quickly to you just for an idea. It says, if I have depression, how does it affect my spiritual life? So we've spoken about that a little bit. And so some of the things that you feel are, I feel worthless and unworthy. Like, why would God love me anyway? Nobody wants or needs me. I feel unloved by God or man. I feel unlovely. I feel hopeless. Life is not worth living. A terrible lethargy where even praying is difficult. Crying is easier than praying. That you feel hugely antisocial. And
Mhm.
that going to meeting and fellowship and everything is like a form of living torture. And it's absolutely exhausting. And people that are, so introverts feel a little bit like that, fellowship can be a little bit overwhelming, but depressed people, it's exactly the same. And all you want to do is run away and hide and sleep. Or that I'm speaking for myself. And singing in church, as praise and worship is like, oh my word, it's so exhausting. And
And
everybody else is
emotional.
so happy and cheerful, and I'm not. So it's
Yeah.
very hard. And then as I said, at the worst end of the spectrum, the thought of death and the blackness and the peace and the quietness is just so appealing when you are really down. And another thing, which is a hard thing when you are miserable, is to realize that the impact of what your feelings and behavior is on everybody else around you. You don't actually have much perception
Mm.
and understanding of how you are impacting the people around you, maybe hurting them, maybe they are praying desperately for you. And so from our spiritual family perspective, that saying where Jesus, where Paul, I think, says, if the body is hurting, everybody's hurting. And if the body's rejoicing, then everybody's rejoicing in the family. And you lose perspective of that when you're depressed. It's like, if I'm miserable, I am just miserable, and I don't care about everybody else around me. And that lack of care, I honestly don't think that God, it is a sin in a sense that you are not being like Jesus and not caring, but it's kind of beyond your control. It's like saying that having diabetes is a sin. It's not. You can't control it. It's not a normal condition or situation to be in. So if you are depressed and you don't care about people around you, it's more, I reckon, that God understands, and he's I don't feel that he's judging you negatively for a condition that you can't control. Am I making sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So, but when you are in a situation that you don't care about what's happening, about your impact on people, you don't realize how bad it is, because you're so wrapped up in your own misery and your own problems and your own wishing that it would all go away and it would all stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah.
Okay, so how can we help someone like that?
Okay. So as far as helping other people are concerned like that, these are just general ideas. You might have, and maybe in the discussion we can come up with some other ideas. But for me, the number one thing is, if somebody else is in that situation, pray for them and pray with them. There's nothing like having a prayer said with you about you, because then you are hearing other people's heartfelt emotions when they're talking to God, but they're talking about you and for you. So you can do it in your private prayers, but more powerful for the person that is unwell is for you to pray with them. So,
Yeah.
and then tell them, if you are praying for them privately, that you are doing that, because if you don't have the opportunity to pray with them face to face or on Zoom or something like this, that you send them a message and say, keeping you in my prayers and asking God for whatever it is that you're asking. And just knowing that other people are praying for you makes a difference. So you pray for them and tell the people that you're praying for them. And it's not about going, oh, I'm so good, I'm praying for you. It's more about giving them support, that they know that God's hearing from more than one person that this person has a problem, and please can God be involved and help. So those are my two biggest things, are pray with them and for them.
Yes.
And then
Can I just say this? If you're praying for someone who's got depression like that, don't be surprised if they burst into tears.
Oh, no, I know. Oh, no, they will.
It doesn't mean they don't appreciate it.
No, I know. And the other thing is that those two things for me hold with any problems more than just depression. So if anybody, if somebody's grieving, if somebody's sick, if somebody's, whatever the situation is that's difficult, if you do pray with them and for them and tell them, then, it's very supportive.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing is, spending quality time with somebody that is miserable is difficult, because they might not want it. You find it's like, oh my word, I'm giving and giving and giving and getting nothing back. But they need you to be with them, because they need support. They need emotional support, they need spiritual support, and they may very well need physical support. So if it's a family member, it's probably slightly easier because you're around more, but it doesn't mean just feeding them, and physically being around them. It's also spending quality time. So talking to them so that they've got the opportunity and the trust, and they know that you genuinely do want to hear about their issues.
What do you do if the person pushes you away and doesn't want you there with them?
then you need to encourage them. If it's a loved one or a friend, then you need to encourage them to find somebody that they can talk to. It doesn't have to be you. I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in the things like, I want to help. I need you to let me help you. And not
Okay.
everybody's in that space, and not everybody has the capacity to help appropriately. So if you genuinely care about them, and you can say to them honestly, I would really like to help you, but I'm okay for it not to be me. But you need somebody to help you. And whether that person is a professional person or another brother or a sister or another family member or somebody that can be there, that they are willing to talk to and willing to trust, but they need help.
Right.
Depression. I honestly don't think depression comes right by itself. In the sense, like, it's not like flu that you get it and you just ride it out and at the end of the day you get better. Because if it's emotional, then there's a reason, there's a cause for it, and you need to deal with the cause and the consequences. If it's
Yes.
physiological, you need to deal with the medical aspect and the physical side of it. So it's not just like instant magic and it's going to go away. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so if they push you away and they don't want you to say to them, that's okay, that's cool. But you need to find somebody that you're willing to talk to or willing to allow to help you.
Mm.
So that
Right.
was the next thing on my thing, is that encourage people to look for help. And if you feel like they want to talk to you, but you don't feel that you have the skill or the ability, you could say to them, look, I'd really love for you to talk to me, but I don't feel qualified to help you in this. For the majority of people, unless it's a medical condition, just knowing that you love them and are willing to listen is a huge thing. Even if you're not qualified to help, but you are being helpful and supportive. So they may want to talk to you and still need professional help. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they
Yes.
and you can sometimes, if it's really bad, you can facilitate the help. In other words, you can say, would you like me to phone the doctor for you and make an appointment? Would you like me to come with you to the psychologist so that you can give them a lift there? But it's also a way of ensuring that they go and encouraging them to keep the appointment.
Mm.
And the other thing, which is a big thing in dealing with a situation like this, is patience. Honestly, if you pray for patience, this is God's gift to you, to learn patience with somebody that's going. No,
Yeah.
I'm being serious. I'm not
Yes,
joking.
you're right. You're
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you think like, oh, good, I've got them to the doctor's appointment. Now everything's going to be fine. And then tomorrow they're crying and miserable and useless and worthless and, everything. And you feel like, oh, I've just taken one step forward and one step back. And it is like that. It can be like that.
Mm.
And so, honestly, if you're praying for them, you need to pray for yourself for patience too, that you're not judgmental, that you are patient and tolerant with them, and without enabling them to be wallowing in their own misery. Do you understand what I'm so you're still
Yeah.
encouraging and supporting them upwards and onwards, but not encouraging them to wallow and to stay where they are. So it's quite a fine balance. But
What might that look like, Kathy?
losing your temper doesn't help one iota. And the more
Yes.
irritable you
Yeah.
are, the more irritable you are with them, and like, oh, for goodness sake, get a grip. They're just going to like back away from you because they get the feeling that you just genuinely don't understand.
Yeah. And it makes the depression worse because then there's someone else that
Irritable with them.
really can't stand them, that they're not worth being around.
Yep. So it
Yeah.
it becomes a circular thing. So honestly, it's like, this is not demeaning in any way, but the same way that you have incredible patience with a baby that can't help itself, and it doesn't matter whether it wakes you at 2 in the morning, or it's got a poo nappy, or it needs a feed, or whatever the issue is with the baby, you do it willingly and patiently and kindly, and because it can't help it. And it's the same with a person suffering with a mental health issue. And if the depression is from a trauma, that's not the person's fault. The fact that they can't move past the trauma is not their fault. So I promise you, mental health patients, you have to have the most unbelievable patience. You really do. And to be supportive and loving and kind and ongoingly loving and kind and supportive is hard work. And it really calls you to be Jesus to these people.
Wow. Yeah, I would certainly need an awful lot of prayer for patience. Oh.
But you know, I read a thing once. In fact, I saw a clip saying, if you pray for patience, do you think God gives you patience? Or do you think he gives you the opportunity to display your patience? And I was like,
oh, yeah. Then I fail at it so many times.
Practice. It's like a muscle that just gets built up as you get put into situations. Yeah.
Okay, and then as far as resources are concerned for depression, the first resource, by far the most important, is God and praying to him. The second resource is your loved ones and your family and your immediate family, whether that is a physical, natural family or our larger spiritual family or both. The third one is your GP and the psychologist. And then I've actually got a list of things which I was going to put up on the board. And these are outside of our immediate sphere of influence, are things like New Zealand has a depression line. And I've got the phone number for it and everything, which I'll email to you so we can send out to everybody.
Yep, sounds good.
And then your emergency support numbers if it's a crisis. So if there's a crisis with somebody and you think that they are a danger to themselves in any way, you phone. In Australia it's 000, in New Zealand it's 111, in America it's 911. I mean, I don't know the rest of the countries in the world, but your emergency number is for an emergency. Regardless, you are not God or Superman. Phone the emergency services. Okay, and then there's Lifeline. There's in Australia and New Zealand. In fact, I think most countries in the world have a Lifeline service, or Compassionate Friends, or whatever it's called. There's a kids helpline. There's Men's Line in Australia for men that are suffering with issues. There's Beyond Blue, which operates in Australia and New Zealand. There's Black Dog, which operates in Australia and New Zealand, and all of these are institutes that will offer you free counseling phone services, and they will be able to direct you to the specific kind of help that you need. So if you've got a trauma background, they would, put you in contact with the correct people for that. If you've got a loss and grief issue, they will put you in contact with loss and grief services. If you've got a medical depression and you want a support group around whatever it is that you've got an issue with. So there is a vast amount of practical community help that doesn't necessarily involve your doctor and a psychiatrist. That's like kind of going to an extreme. So I really think the first port of call in helping others is God. Second port of call is the family and loved ones of the individual or ourselves. Then going into the medical profession and the community support that is available around that. So that's from a secular perspective.
And we'll send all that out. We'll send all that out in the Family Matters email once we're done with this one. Yes, so we'll send all those resources out to you if you're getting the Family Matters email. So if you haven't, subscribe.
Yes, sir. Okay, and then to close on a more positive note, I wanted to just have a look at some scriptures. Some of them that were really important to me and that meant a lot to me, and then other ones that are really positive for, I'm just going to read them and just listen to them and see where they're coming from. So Isaiah 61, which was read for us at the beginning, I hung on to this chapter for dear life, that Jesus had come to proclaim the good news to the poor, and I felt poor, spiritually, physically. I mean, I was just as miserable as anything. He had sent Jesus to heal me when I was brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and I felt captives and living in darkness to my misery and my emotional, physical condition. To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God. When you put yourself into that position, that God's got a plan for me to show me favor and to give, to work vengeance on my behalf. He sent Jesus for me for these specific things. And it goes on to say, to comfort all who mourn. And I know it's an overall political and societal chapter, but it's very personal too. I believe Jesus came to comfort me in my mourning, that he's providing for me when I'm grieving, that he's going to bestow on me a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of the spirit of despair. Because when you are depressed, you have a spirit of despair. And my prayer is for a garment of praise and oil of joy to look forward to. I want to have that hope. I want to have that joy and that enthusiasm and that passion. And when you're depressed, you just don't have it.
Don't have it. No. You're
So
exactly
then
right.
the other passage, which is a huge passage for me too, and this was more when I had recovered and was feeling better, was praise to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles. And that's 2 Corinthians 1, verse 3 and 4. So for me, he's the Father of all comfort for me, that he comforts me in my troubles and my sorrows, and brings me to a place where I can praise him and have the oil of joy. So those two passages, Isaiah 61 and 2 Corinthians 1, were very powerful passages for me. And then
Yeah.
I lived in the Psalms a lot, because I can think that you can see a lot of misery and unhappiness with David, and a lot of it was around his enemies. But sometimes he's just like, oh my word, life is so tough, and it comes across in his Psalms. And I found that really comforting, that he could talk to God about his misery and his condition, and 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 then in the same psalm go from being, oh, life is hell, to, but I've got a God who loves me and looks after me. And I found that quite hope inspiring, that when I'm really that down, I will get to a place where I can look up and, lift up my head and acknowledge that he's the God of all comfort. So I'll just read some of I mean, you can find gazillions in the Psalms, but I'll just read you a few. So, when the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. So that for me tied in beautifully with Isaiah 61 about being brokenhearted and crushed in spirit. Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And the famous words of Jesus, come to me all who are labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And I don't think that those burdens are necessarily only burdens of sin and the burdens of this world, but also emotional burdens. And Jesus is promising that he's going to give us rest from those burdens. And so when I'm really feeling down and can't manage anything, or it's all too much, I have to go to Jesus and say, you've promised me that your yoke is easy and it's not feeling light.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, being able to be just so open and honest like that, it must be, it's just so important that to be able to have that release in that way, isn't it? To be able to just pour it out And I think it is so comforting to us just to see these Psalms and to go, David knew what that felt like. He was in the pit of despair. He knew what that felt like. And just comforting to know he was there. And yet
Absolutely.
he could speak these words of hope and praise and victory as well. So it's like, it must be possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, there's millions. So you can look at them in the Psalms. And then another one, which is very positive. We know all of these verses really well, like cast your anxiety on him because he cares for you. And this is another one which I also held on to. For I am convinced that there's neither death nor life, angels or demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation that is able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And quite honestly, I believe that I am the only person that can separate myself from God's love. Nothing else can. God has promised me that nothing else can. But if I don't put my hand out and say, help me, I'm cutting myself off personally from him.
Yeah. Actually, it's been quite a powerful exercise to use that verse and make it really personal by putting my own or our own problem or issue in there. I believe that this problem or this issue or whatever it is, making it
or my
personal
depression.
Yes, absolutely. Making it personal to what we're going through, inserting that into that verse. It's quite a powerful exercise, actually. Having done that one myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, just writing that down and it just makes quite a statement.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathy.
Sorry, I've gabbled on for a long time.
Oh, that's all right. No, it's been good. It's been really great.
Amazing. Thank you.
And you've not only given us so much of what you know and what you've experienced from your work perspective, but also, we've seen a lot from your own heart, your own life, your own experiences through depression.
Yeah.
And that just makes it so much more powerful. And I know a couple of times you had me.
Sorry. And myself.
So so it's been a very powerful 30 minute session tonight. So thank you so much, Kathy. It's been really great.
Pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.
And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be really benefit from this. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share the video if you thought it was interesting. See you next time, God willing.